Entrepreneurship is a sport. In order for you to win the game, you have to have the right mindset. What creates the right mindset is the right habits, because your habits will dictate how you feel, your habits will dictate how you think, and most important, your habits will dictate how you act. That's why more and more entrepreneurs are giving away the habit of drinking because they realize it doesn't serve them. Today, we're going to react to a video by Andrew Huberman. He talks about what does alcohol do to your brain and why you should eliminate it. Let's begin.
Let's address what alcohol is and how it affects the cells and tissues and organs of your body. Then we'll take a look at some of the epidemiology, that is, how many people are consuming alcohol and how much they're drinking. And then you'll be able, I think, to get a good sense of how the alcohol that you're drinking, if you're drinking any at all, is impacting your brain and body and the choices you might want to make about how and when to drink alcohol, or even if you want to eliminate alcohol altogether. Okay, so some basic chemistry and biology of alcohol. And again, I'll make this very clear, even if you don't have a chemistry and biology background.
So first, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not here to demonize alcohol. I'm not here to tell you that you should stop drinking alcohol. I'm just giving you the facts about what does alcohol do to your brain, and you could choose. Because the reality is that you might like alcohol. I liked alcohol. I truly enjoy a nice tequila. I truly enjoy a nice wine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But once I realized what it does to my brain and how it stops you from being a high performer, I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice whether that high that I was chasing was better than my performance. So again, this video is not for you to say alcohol is bad or alcohol is good. It's making the educated choice to see how does this affect you and what you want out of your life.
Because of the structure of alcohol, it is what's called both water soluble and fat soluble. Translated into what's meaningful for you, what that means is when you drink alcohol, it can pass into all the cells and tissues of your body. It has no trouble just passing right into those cells. So unlike a lot of substances and drugs that actually attach to the surface of cells, to receptors, as they're called, little parking spots, and then trigger a bunch of downstreams, like domino cascades of effects, alcohol actually has its own direct effects on cells because it can really just pass into those cells. So it's water and fat soluble. And the fact that it can pass into so many organs and cells so easily is really what explains its damaging effects.
What he's saying is that alcohol goes deep into your cells. It's not just superficial damage. It goes deep into your cells that eventually is going to affect your liver. The main organ that alcohol affects is the liver.
I should mention that there are three main types of alcohol. There's isopropyl, methyl, and ethyl alcohol. And only the last one, ethyl alcohol or ethanol, is fit for human consumption. However, it is still toxic, okay? It produces substantial stress and damage to cells. I'd love to be able to tell you otherwise, but that's just a fact. Ethanol produces substantial damage to cells. And it does that because when you ingest ethanol, it has to be converted into something else because it is toxic to the body. And there's a molecule inside of all of us called NAD, and you may have heard of NAD because it's quite popular. There's a lot of discussion about NAD in the longevity literature right now. NAD is present in all our cells from birth until death. The levels of NAD tend to go down across the lifespan. There are ideas that increasing levels of NAD may extend lifespan. A lot of that is still controversial, or at least we should say is ongoing in terms of the research. But nonetheless, when you ingest ethanol, NAD and related biochemical pathways are involved in converting that ethanol into something called acetaldehyde. It's broken down into acetaldehyde. And if you thought ethanol was bad, acetaldehyde is particularly bad. Acetaldehyde is poison. It will kill cells. It damages and kills cells, and it is indiscriminate as to which cells it damages and kills. Now, that's a problem, obviously, and the body deals with that problem by using another component of the NAD biochemical pathway to convert acetaldehyde into something called acetate. Acetate is actually something that your body can use as fuel. And that process of going from ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate does involve the production of a toxic molecule, right? Again, acetaldehyde is really toxic. And NAD, and if we want to get technical, it's the NAD to NADH ratio. And that chemical step is the rate limiting step to ethanol's metabolism. What does that mean for you? What that means is that if your body can't do this conversion of ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate fast enough, well, acetaldehyde will build up in your body and cause more damage.
So when you're consuming alcohol, it goes into your cells and it starts to poison every single cell and doesn't discriminate. Like Andrew said, it just goes into every cell in your body. And unless your body could reframe it and turn it into fuel, it's still going to be stuck in your body. That's why we have the hangovers. That's why we feel like shit every single time that we drink. That's why like the alcohol doesn't just shake off, that you have to build the stamina, to hold your alcohol, because it just stays in your cells until it turns into a different chemical.
And the place where it does that is within the liver. And cells within the liver are very good at this conversion process. But they are cells and they are exposed to the acetaldehyde in the conversion process. And so cells within the liver really take a beating in the alcohol metabolism events. So the key thing to understand here is that when you ingest alcohol, you are, yes, ingesting a poison, and that poison is converted into an even worse poison in your body, and some percentage of that worse poison is converted into a form of calories that you can use to generate energy, generate ATP.
So one of the strongest organs in your body is the liver. I remember when my wife got sick, and they thought they were going to do a liver transplant because her ALS and ALTs were so high, like the toxins, the liver was not functioning properly. So they were not distributing the toxin properly. They thought they were going to have a liver transplant. And the doctor said, like, Raul, the liver is one of the strongest organs in your body. Like, if you just give it time, and it might just heal itself. That's what the guys who are alcoholics, they could beat down the liver until the end, and they stop drinking it, and the liver heals itself. So that's why we could drink so much alcohol. If you drink alcohol, the liver will continue to reproduce those toxins, but it will strengthen itself after you stop drinking.
And the reason why alcohol is considered empty calories is because that entire process is very metabolically costly, but there's no real nutritive value of the calories that it creates. You can use it for immediate energy, but it can't be stored in any kind of meaningful or beneficial way. It doesn't provide any vitamins. It doesn't provide any amino acids. It doesn't provide any fatty acids. It's truly empty calories. I know some people talk about sugar as empty calories, but sugar actually is a far better fuel source than alcohol or acetate.
That's when you eat sugar, you get high. It's like the sugar high, right? Same thing with alcohol. If you drink alcohol, you get loose. You start to change your state. But at the end, both are damaging. They're empty calories. So there's no purpose for them. They're not good calories that actually feed you. There's no vitamins, there's no nutrition. It's just constantly poison into your body.
Nonetheless, when you ingest alcohol, some percentage is being shuttled into a worse poison and some is being shuttled into a fuel source. Now, the important thing to understand is that it is the poison, the acetaldehyde itself, that leads to the effect of being inebriated or drunk. I think most people don't realize that being drunk is actually a poison-induced disruption in the way that your neural circuits work.
When I learned this is when I started realizing that every single time that I get drunk, I am poisoning my cells. Like that high, that state change is actually poisoning your brain cells, poisoning your body. That is the effect of having poison, is to be drunk.
And so we should ask ourselves, like, which neural circuits, what brain areas, what body areas involved in feeling drunk or inebriated. Now, in thinking about this state of being tipsy or happy or really drunk or a little bit drunk, I want to mention something I think most people aren't aware of. And that's the fact that for people that are regular drinkers or that have a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, when they drink, they tend to feel very energized and very good for longer periods of time. Again, people have a genetic predisposition to alcohol, or people who are chronic drinkers, or even just, if you recall, chronic doesn't have to mean a ton of alcohol, but they're drinking 1 or 2 per night, or they're every other night type drinkers, or Thursday through Sunday drinkers. Those people typically experience an increase in alertness and mood when they drink, whereas occasional drinkers will have a briefer, meaning less long-lasting period of feeling good when they drink, and then more quickly transition into a state in which they're tired or they start losing motor skills, they start slurring their speech. I also want to emphasize this is distinct from tolerance. We'll talk about tolerance later and exactly what tolerance means. But I really want to highlight the fact that when people ingest this poison, because indeed it is poison, the range of effects is very different, and you can reliably predict who are the people with a predisposition to alcoholism and who are the people who are more regular drinkers by the contour, the timing of the different effects. And again, people who tend to feel more alert and excited every time they drink, they tend to get a real lift. They become kind of the life of the party, and that lasts a long while. Those people are the ones that really have to be careful about predisposition for alcoholism. And those people also need to be careful about their drinking and the amount of drinking that they're doing, even if they're not full-blown alcoholics.
So this is the one that got me this awareness, because I always thought like, hey, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm good. Every single time that I drink, man, I'm the life of the party. I like to dance. I like to talk. I like to make jokes. My family has an alter ego for me. It's Jay-Z. I begin to rap. Every single time I get drunk, I begin to rap. And I didn't have the hangover. I had a hangover feel, but I didn't have that down that he talks about. And now looking back, I realized that in my family, like my uncles would drink, my father would drink. Every single man in my family was a drinker. And nobody said they were alcoholics. But every single one of them drank at one point. It wasn't until my dad came to this country and he stopped drinking when I became a teenager. He stopped drinking. I said, I'm not going to give my son the example of me having drinks at home. And then I started drinking when I was a teenager, and I had the same the effect of like just being alive at the party, just being a social drinker. But I didn't realize that was a preposition of being an alcoholic, because I cannot just drink one drink. If I drink a glass of wine, I have to drink the whole bottle of wine. If I drink some tequila, we have to do shots. So I always thought it was just a behavior, of way of thinking, of way of being. Like I do everything to the extreme. But I realize now that it's in my DNA. It was passed down from generation to generation because that habit was okay. Nobody said you shouldn't drink. We encouraged men to drink. We encouraged men to loosen up. And when I heard this, I realized that, man, I need to make sure that I have the awareness to know that if I cannot have just one drink and I want to finish the bottle, then something has control over me.
Alcohol, who are not accustomed to drinking alcohol, have to be concerned about drinking alcohol for other reasons, because it can impair motor function and judgment, etc. But in thinking about the biochemical effects of alcohol and what it's doing to the body, what it's doing in all cases is it's consumed into the gut, right? Goes into the stomach. The liver immediately starts this conversion that we talked about before of ethanol to acetaldehyde to acetate. And some amount of acetaldehyde and acetate are making it into the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. Again, the brain has this fence around it that we call the blood-brain barrier, or the BBB. Most things, thankfully, can't pass across the blood-brain barrier, but alcohol, because it's water and fat soluble, just cruises right across this fence and into the milieu, the environment of the brain, which is made up of a couple different major cell types: neurons, nerve cells, and so-called glial cells, which are in between the nerve cells. And we'll talk about the effects on each of those soon. So what happens when alcohol gets into the brain that makes us feel tipsy or drunk, and in some people makes people feel really especially energized and happy? Well, alcohol is indiscriminate in terms of which brain areas it goes to. Again, it doesn't bind to particular receptors, but it does seem to have a propensity or an affinity for particular brain areas that are involved in certain kinds of thinking and behavior. So one of the first things that happens is that there's a slight, at least after the first drink or second drink, there's a slight suppression in the activity of neurons in the prefrontal cortex. This is an area of your neocortex that's involved in thinking and planning, and perhaps above all, in suppression of impulsive behavior. So if you go to a party and they're serving alcohol and people are consuming drinks, what you'll notice is that a few minutes into that party, the volume of people's voices will increase. And that's because people are simply not paying attention to their voice modulation. As other people start speaking more loudly, other people are speaking more loudly. We've all had this experience, right, of going to a party and then you step outside for a moment and you go, oh my goodness, I was shouting. You come home the next day, you got a sore throat. It might be that you picked up some sort of bug, some virus or something. But oftentimes it's just the fact that you've been shouting all night just to be heard, because as the prefrontal cortex shuts down, people stop modulating their level of speech quite as much. Also notice that people start gesticulating more. People will start standing up and sitting down more. They'll start walking around more. If there's music on, people might spontaneously start dancing. All of this is because these areas of the prefrontal cortex normally are providing what's called top-down inhibition. They are releasing a neurotransmitter called GABA onto various parts of the brain. They're involved in impulsive motor behavior and thought patterns. And as you shut down the prefrontal cortex, that GABAergic suppression of impulses starts to be released. So people will say things that they want to say without so much forethought about what they're saying. Or they might do things that they want to do without really thinking it through quite as much, or they might not even remember thinking it through at all, or experience, I should say, thinking it through at all. We haven't talked about blacking out yet and the effects of alcohol on memory.
That's why they say that babies and drunks tell the truth, because they don't have that buffer that maybe I shouldn't say this, that buffer of maybe I shouldn't do this. So the more we drink, the less control we have. That buffer is gone. So all of a sudden you're going to act a different way. Again, the behavior changes. The thinking process changes. And then you're not as in control as you used to be before. Why? Because the brain now has no filter. No filter, no buffer. Now you're saying things that you're probably going to regret later on, or doing things that you're going to regret later on. Last time I was on a date with my wife, we talked about all the stupid shit that we did when we were drunk. And we're looking back, like, man, we were lucky. We're lucky that we didn't do more stupid stuff that we're still here. Why? Because the filter wasn't there.
But as long as we're there, I'll just tell you that alcohol has a very strong effect in suppressing the neural networks that are involved in memory formation and storage. This is why oftentimes we forget the events of a night out if we've been drinking. One of the more important things to know about the effects of alcohol in the brain is this disruption in top-down inhibition, but also that areas of the brain that are involved in flexible behavior, sort of considering different options, like I could do A or I could do B. I could say this to them or I could say that. I could say it in that way or I could say it in this way. This might be a little more tactful. Those brain areas basically shut down entirely, and people just tend to say what they want to say. So the key thing to understand is that when people drink, the prefrontal cortex and top-down inhibition is diminished. That is, habitual behavior and impulsive behavior starts to increase. Now, what's interesting is this is true in the short term, so after people have 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 drinks, but it's also true that the more often that people drink, there are changes in the very circuits that underlie habitual and impulsive behavior. Okay, this is really important to highlight, so much so that I want to drill into it a little bit more deeply. For the person that drinks, say, every Thursday night or every Friday night, or goes out only on Saturdays, but every Saturday, there's evidence that there are changes in the neural circuits of the brain that control habitual behavior and impulsive behavior, and they are modified and strengthened in ways that make those people more habitual and more impulsive outside the times in which they are drinking. And when they drink, impulsive and habitual behavior tends to increase even further.
So that's the scary part. The more you drink, the less control you have, the less filters you have. So now habitually, you're reacting to life. Habitually, you are actually becoming somebody else. That's why people change when they drink. They have a different persona, a different version of themselves. And the more you drink, the more that version becomes who you are.
This is something that's not often talked about when discussing the effects of alcohol. I mean, we all know the effects of being drunk can be bad, right? Can be bad in terms of judgment, motor coordination. Certainly driving drunk is a terrible thing, get you or other people killed, and so on. But rarely do we hear about the changes in neural circuits from just 1 or 2 nights of regular drinking. Again, chronic drinking doesn't necessarily mean every day and every night. It could be the person that simply drinks every Thursday or every Friday, or just once a week has 3 or 4 drinks, or maybe even a few more. That person is going to experience a decrease in this top-down inhibition, so an increase in impulsivity and habitual behavior because the brake on those behaviors has been removed while they're drinking, but also changes in the very neural circuits that allow habitual and impulsive behavior to occur more readily even when they're not drinking. And if you want to know the actual substrate for that, the cellular substrate, I can briefly describe it. It's really interesting. Again, you don't need to know any biology to understand this. What it does is it increases the number of synapses, the actual points of connection in the neural circuits that control habitual behavior. So there's literally a growth of the neural circuits in your brain that lead to existing habit execution, right? The performance of things you already know how to do, and a reduction in the neural circuits, or I should say a reduction in the number of synapses of the contacts within the neural circuits that are controlling behavior. So this, again, is a not often discussed aspect of alcohol intake. Fortunately, it is reversible. So in animals or humans that undertake a period of abstinence of anywhere from 2 to 6 months, these neural circuits return to normal, except in cases where people have been chronically drinking large volumes of alcohol for many, many years. And in those cases, while there is some recovery of brain circuitry after people get sober, meaning completely sober, they stop drinking entirely, there is evidence of long-lasting impact of heavy alcohol usage throughout the lifespan. But of course, this doesn't mean that anyone that's suffering from alcoholism or that used to should not continue to focus on their health. You absolutely should. All is not lost. But for people that have been drinking for a lot of years, maybe you went to college and you drank a lot in those years and your neural circuits change. If there's a period in which you don't drink alcohol, again, from 2 to 6 months and ideally longer, those neural circuits can then be remodified back to their original state.
So the good news is that the body's so perfect that it can reverse it. But the reality is that there's always consequences. I remember the moment that I stopped drinking is because I didn't want my son to have an example of a father who drank. I did the same thing that my father did. The moment that my son became a teenager, I stopped drinking. But see, it didn't stop me because I was around a wrong crowd, but it hopefully stops my son because he doesn't know a father that drinks. I realized that it's not useful for me at the level that I'm in right now. That alcohol does more damage than pleasure. It's not useful for my capacity. It's not useful for my mental health. It's not useful for giving an example to my son. See, at the end of the day, your actions, your habits are going to pass down to your kids. They're going to pass down to the people around you. And if we make the excuses that, man, I'm just going to take the edge off, I'm just going to have a little bit of drink here and there, and if you're not conscious about the damage that you're creating, you're not being the leader that God wanted you to be. I'm not here to tell you whether alcohol is good or bad. I'm here to tell you the consequences, that people are looking at you as a leader. Your job is to look at the information and ask yourself, is this useful or not useful for me? Can I justify the pleasure and be okay with the pain? Or do I need to make some choices that will be radically different to change my habits, to change my mindset in order for me to win the game of life? Because as an entrepreneur, we need to have every single edge that we could get a hold of. And if alcohol is not giving you the edge because it's preventing you from making the right decisions, the right choices, and it's stealing your energy, well, maybe it's time for you to let go of that habit. Maybe it's time for you to say no. Maybe it's time for you to just give yourself a break. Start with 100 days. I challenge you to let go of at least 100 days and see if that makes a difference. Because that's what I did. I stopped drinking 100 days at a time. Now I'm in the path of no sugar for 100 days. It's my 80th day, I believe. But see, every single thing that I do is based on where I want to go in life. Is this habit serving me, or is this habit taken away from what I want in life? Because at the end of the day, your choices are directed by your habits, and your habits will create your destiny. So my intention for you today is to realize that your habits will create a legacy, that your kids, your family, your employees, your customers, they're all watching you. How you act, how you react, what are the habits that you have? And if alcohol is a habit that no longer serves you, I challenge you to go into a 100-day challenge of no alcohol and see how that could change you, because the best is yet to come. If you found value in this video, make sure to check out this other video right here when I talk about how do entrepreneurs use pressure to grow and scale their business. Take a look at it right now.